Jeff's point of view. Those eyes, your mesmeric eyes, stared at him with hatred. It made his stomach constrict with dysphoria, a feeling that shattered him inside. It felt similar to that of sadness. Not that he could remember what any other emotion felt like, other than killing, though. He did, however, know what the burning sensation in his chest was. He'd felt it that night when you leapt from the bridge. It was heartache. He was terrified of losing you. He knew you despised who he had become, for what he was. He couldn't blame you, but he couldn't change either. He tried. The voices always stopped him. His hand outstretched, clasping hold of your wrist, his callous fingers tightening. Sarah, listen. Go fuck yourself, you spat, interrupting him mid-sentence as he yanked your arm away. He could barely concentrate as you opened the door to the car and slammed it shut behind you. The loud collision of metal hitting metal resonating in the silence. Only when your footsteps became a distant sound did he snap from his trance. He heaved himself up from the corroded leather seat and out into the meadow that you had swerved into. The cold night air caressed his face, causing a few strands of his straggly black hair to sway behind his shoulders as he searched for you. His orbs finally setting on your small form as it descended into the formation of trees. Sarah, he hissed, his voice low, preeminent. Your middle finger was the only answer he received. A growl erupted from him as he tramped towards you, leaves crunching beneath his combat boots. He was controlling, yes. Possessive? Yes. But that wasn't the reason he was trying to stop you. Well, at least not the full reason. The forest was dangerous. It was where they lurched. The creatures that wanted to hurt you, that wanted to take you away from him. Or what? I mean it, Sarah. Don't take another fucking step. You scoffed, flinging your hands above you exasperatedly. Or what, you lying piece of shit? You'll kill me? Jeff was taken aback by the peculiar change in your attitude. He'd grown used to the delicate personality that you eluded. You hadn't spoken back to him in months. Not since that time when things had gotten too far. It'd been 5 months since then. He thought that you had learned your lesson, but it was blatant that you hadn't. You were angry. He knew that. Betrayed, of course. It destroyed him inside to know that he was the reason for it, but he couldn't control it. He had a demon, a monster that fueled inside him. It possessed him. It told him what to do. He just couldn't ignore it. It was impossible when it was screaming inside his head. The voice was breaking the barrier he'd built to protect you from being hurt, to protect you from himself. It was taking control again. Kill her. He grimaced, answering the voice subconsciously. I don't want to hurt her. What's the matter, Jeffrey? Have you gone soft? I love her. Jeffrey. I won't do it. Ha! What a pitiful behavior from a killer. You'll never be nothing more than monster, Jeffrey. Shut up! That tormenting voice was consuming him, echoing in the walls of his mind. He could hear the crusade as it battled, fighting for eminence. It wanted him to listen, to fulfill its heinous deeds. But he couldn't listen to it. He wouldn't. His blunt nail scraped against his clammy forehead as he clawed at his face, somehow believing he would succeed in ripping that damn voice from his head. He wanted to destroy it, to make it shut up, and yet it only grew louder. It was mocking him, taunting him. He could hear its laughter resonate the formidable silence, but it wasn't just any laughter. It was his laughter. Jeff. Your voice disrupted his moment of madness, deterring him. He could auscultate the strain in your voice, the fear. You no longer eluded your confidence from before. Now you were scared of him. He could tell by the expression that etched across your pretty features. Heck, he could smell it. If it were possible, He would drown in that look. The look that his victims gave him before he ended their pitiful existence. That look you were giving him right now. You stared at him like he was a lunatic. She doesn't love you. There it was again. That stupid little voice niggling at him. But what if it was telling the truth? What if the voice had been right all along? His head cocked to the side, his luminous orbs darkening. Do you love me? Jeff. Answer me. I don't know. Your words hit him like a whiplash. They rippled through his body like a car crash in slow motion. How could he have been so stupid? How could you possibly love him? He was psychotic. He was a killer. You hated him. Or at least that's what the voice in his head told him. And yet he loved you. He loved you so much, it was unbearable. Or what he believed his twisted perspective on love meant. You were the only thing that he had ever kept alive. Not because he wanted to hurt you, but because without you, he feared his cold, miserable heart would stop beating. He needed you. You don't know? Everything about you is a lie, Jeff. A twisted, guiltless lie. A growl interrupted in his throat. Don't say it. Don't fucking say it. I'm done. His knees plummeted to the ground, his arms limply swaying by his sides. He couldn't feel anything besides the muddy grass as it submerged beneath him. He felt numb, broken. He rarely expressed any other emotion than anger, besides when he was trying to make up for his abusive behavior. But now he was wearing his feelings on his sleeve. But I love you, he whispered as his head tilted forward, his eyebrows furrowing, a few wrinkles creasing across his head. There was something wet on his cheek, a strange liquid he couldn't remember ever feeling. His fingers traced the space underneath his eyes. It was his eyes that were leaking. He was crying. If you loved me, you will let me go. Let me go. Your dispute kept repeating itself. He wouldn't let you go. He couldn't. You were his. He hadn't went through all the trouble to keep you for nothing. He was the one that protected you, that kept you safe. Without him, you wouldn't last one day. He knew he was nasty at times, that he was the source of all your bruises, that he hurt you. But the big bad world, as he'd often referred, would eat you alive. You needed him, whether you chose to believe it or not. You're mine, he growled. His voice was hoarse, his throat parched. He could feel the remainder of his sanity shredding. Jeff was taking over. I was never yours to keep, Jeff. I never was. He watched how your small form retreated, how intimidated you appeared by his tall silhouette as he stood up. The way your hair weaved in the wind, how beautiful you were in the moonlight that dissolved into the tree branches. You were so delicate, like a porcelain doll, that he could shatter with just a touch. He took a step closer, his hand reaching for you. But just as his fingertips brushed against your arm, you reeled around and sprinted into the forest, running from him, running into the wrath of danger. Panic surged through him as he lunged forward. Come back here, you fucking bitch! He screamed, his voice filled with desperation. They were not going to find you. They were not going to lay their filthy hands on you. They were not going to hurt you. He would make damn well sure of it. Reader's point of view. Time had become extraneous. You couldn't recall how long you had been running, nor how long it had been since you'd last heard Jeff's footfall behind you. All you did, however, know was that you were lost, hungry, and your legs were aching. You even dared to say you were scared. Every time you heard the slightest noise, it resulted in your stomach constricting in dread. You didn't know what roamed in these woods. Maybe it had been a mistake. You should have just stayed with him, after all the incidents with those other creatures. A sigh escaped your lips as your body collapsed against one of the trees, your knees skimming the muddy ground. You were too exhausted to keep going. Your adrenaline had long since subsided. Your feet rested against the uprooted vines that extended across the ground. Several unkempt branches scattered in various places. They had most likely fallen from the trees during winter. Rain cascaded around your huddled form, trickling down your forehead and into your fluttering eyelashes. The weather had changed significantly since earlier, and it only made the forest more eerie. You remained there, your mind flooded with thoughts, but were alerted from your daydream. He was waiting for you to come to him, to walk directly into his peripheral vision. He was giving you the choice. Minutes passed as he watched, overwrought with concern, as your small form collapsed against a tree, your persistence outweighed by exhaustion. Then he noticed something. Not just something, but someone shining a torch on you, revealing your huddled form to them. You could see wrinkled, decrepit hands reaching for you, hushed whispers of comfort smothering you in pity as they placed with you to trust them. What morons! He almost laughed at their bullshit, at how they thought they could protect you. He smirked as he trampled across the muddy ground, unaware of the disastrous path he left behind him, as branches snapped beneath his combat boots. He hadn't been planning on killing tonight, but you know when the opportunity arises.
I wouldn't do that if I were you.
Jeff's head snapped across his shoulder, strands of his synced hair falling over his face with a quick movement. He scoured the area around him, his dark gaze searching for the source of the voice. Yet all he came across was one tree after the other. Stupid trees. He was sick of the sight of them. His senses were attracted by movement to his far left, his vision fixating on what had caused the motion. Slouched up against the ladders of an obsolete treehouse that he had failed to notice was a shadowed silhouette. That silhouette, that stance, he could differentiate it from anywhere. Fuck you, he sneered, his ominous voice raised barely above a whisper.
Nothing surprises me with that vulgar tongue of yours, Jeffrey. Though I must admit, I'm a little disappointed with your vocabulary. Not got any bigger words to use?
The masked male sighed heinously, adjusting the fictile mask that shielded his features behind. Jeff snorted, a giggle lingering from his scarred mouth.
You think you're a real genius, don't you? I'm not here to spout out insults, Jeff. I'm here to cover your ass. The boss is asking questions, and the last I recall, they weren't your targets.
Not my targets? Not my fucking targets? Jeff's head tilted forward, his mood changing as he grinned at the other male. The action stretched the lacerations inflicted on his cheeks, causing them to reopen. He could feel the blood, his blood, trickling down over his neck, apprised by the sensation as it dripped onto the fabric of his hoodie, staining it crimson. They made themselves targets when they decided to interfere. It was almost a growl, though more animalistic, almost like a warning to the masked male to stay out of his business. Jeff abraded his boot into the ground, staring in your direction, before something obstructed his path.
Get out of my way, fuckface. No. Get out of my fucking way.
Dark sockets glared into his own, only fueling Jeff's thirst to slash his knife through this fucktard's face. It almost made him curious how much effort he'd have to put into getting it through that mask first. The thought would have left him more amused, had he not had more important matters at hand. He just needed this inconvenience out of the way so he could take back what was his. Eyeless Jack. The tone of his voice was different from before. This time, it was more vicious. Aberrant, insane. He was through with playing games. The male, referred to as Eyeless Jack, inhaled a sharp breath, the space between his collarbone dipping slightly as though trying to retain his patience. Jeff, on the other hand, remained vigilant, not like he gave two fucks what this idiot thought. That was until Eyeless Jack spoke, his composure still calm, his voice placid, yet emphasizing every word.
She's keeping me from duties and slowing you down. Why go through so much trouble to keep something that has no importance?
Jeff furrowed his eyebrows. Not to state the obvious, Sherlock, but she's my responsibility.
You want to risk everything for a human? You want to give us all fucking up?
I'm still killing, aren't I?
Which is exactly my point. You're killing outwits of the list. You have duties, Jeff. This isn't some game in which you pull the strings. You think it's any wonder that she ran? Not even your little childhood sweetheart can put up with your shit anymore.
Jeff's steps were slow, so slow and menacing that he put even the master of creepiness, Laughing Jack, to shame. He was erratic, unpredictable. Everything about him was instantaneous, unknowing himself exactly how far he was willing to go when his anger took control, or exactly what he was capable of. He was a monster that was sure and on his thirst to kill and nothing more. You see, I don't give a fuck about that. I just want back what's mine.
And what exactly do you plan on doing? Do you think you can kill me, Jeffrey?
A giggle erupted from Jeff's mouth as he dangled his knife between his fingers, his eyes narrowing dangerously. He was taunting EJ into a fight. The masked man, however, did not answer to the provocation, his stance eluding equilibrium. Yet the defiance only drove Jeff crazy.
I'll kill anyone that gets in my way. Is that too hard to understand in that puny brain of yours?
EJ thrust his arms forward, his temper reaching a level he never knew possible. His gloved hand grasped around the collar of Jeff's stained hoodie, the very stench of putrid blood filtrating his nostrils.
You think you love her? Is that it? Well, you don't.
The fabric crumbled between his fingers, the sheer fury of his actions accentuating that despite the crazed outburst, he was in fact trying to knock some sense into his supposed friend, prepared for a fight if it came to it, whatever it took to make him listen. The dark-haired killer thrummed his sharp fingertips against the surface of the treehouse ladders, the cuspated edge of his blunt nails scraping against the wooden grains in an attempt to leave some form of imprint, or more so to calm the fury forming in him. It was funny, ironic, actually, that during the incident, his hands had been scalded, leaving him with no fingerprints, with no identity.
You think I keep her around because I love her?
Eyeless Jack's expression remained desperate, almost emotionless. He could see through Jeff's lies better than he could most things.
It's blatant, Jeff. You have to realize that they'll kill her sooner or later. And even if they don't, she'll eventually die from old age. Or from your own hands. Whatever her fate is, you can't avoid the inevitable.
Jeff lunged at the shorter male, his behavior obscured by his resentfulness of the truth, by malice, by the overwhelming desire to hurt this vermin that took nothing but pleasure in taunting him. The first impact he made sense of was his fist colliding with the ceramic mask, his knuckles taking the brunt damage of the impact, followed by the painful sensation that lingered up his arm. And yet he repeated his actions again, and again, and again. He could barely regain control despite having EJ pinned to the ground beneath him, his knees pressed into his chest in an intrusive manner. But when he did, he leaned down, his warm breath lingering.
Here's my words for you, fuckface. If you even dare to lay one fucking finger on her, I'll personally rip your intestines out and stuff you with the leftovers of that night's dinner. With that sort of temper, I wouldn't be surprised if you killed her yourself. Heat of the moment sort of thing, you know?
Eyeless Jack mocked, tilting his head to the side as he chuckled. He knew how to grind on Jeff's nerves, how to rival him up, how to get under his skin.
Come on, try it, Jeffrey. I dare you. We both know you can't kill me.
Jeff strained to apply more pressure on the gray skin, to create a few incisions with the sharp end of his blade. Yet he controlled himself, despite the craving to start the counting game of how many stab wounds this dimwit could handle. It would solve nothing, though, besides release some of his anger. The dimwit would heal himself within a matter of seconds. That he envied. When he was certain that the masked male was not going to initiate a fight, he heaved himself up to his feet, his glare fixated on those dark sockets that stared at him as he withdrew backwards, his movements slow.
Not one finger,
he warned, retreating his knife and shoving it back into the crevice of his pocket. The male seethed in response, thrusting his arm upwards in an exasperated manner.
You take her back, then you steal her fate.
Her fate was sealed from the day we met. It wasn't hard to conclude that he'd seal your fate from the moment you met. Even now, after all those years, every thought he had still centralized on you. Everything he did was for you. You were the purpose of his existence. He never meant for things to turn out the way they had, for you to despise him, to think of him as a monster. He sometimes wondered if he had been blinded by his greed, by his reluctance to lose the only thing that he gave a damn about in this miserable reality of his. He wanted that same fairy tale that you had daydreamed about, that you still dreamed about. The thing, however, was that not one single person could see the twisted plots that lay beneath the surface of these stories. He remembered once how you had compared your relationship to Beauty and the Beast. Those words you had spoke, that comparison, it had never left his mind. Belle gave up her freedom to save her family from harm, Jeff, just like I did. She remained with the Beast for months, accepting that he was a demented, terrifying creature who had a terrible way of expressing himself. But then she noticed something. Beneath the aggressive, controlling demeanor, there was a scared, lonely soul that just wanted to be loved, that wanted to be accepted. Belle changed him, Jeff. They got their happy ending. And yet we never will. During his reminiscence, he had been barely aware of the faint footsteps on the ground behind him. Jeff? That voice. He knew that voice.